They always come back, and when they do, it never feels casual. That sudden glow on your screen is not just a message, it's an intrusion, a shadow slipping back into your life. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a few words, but deep down, you feel it, the tension in your chest, the questions spinning in your mind. Hope mixes with dread, and you wonder, why now? What do they really want? Here's the part nobody likes to admit. The message is never about love. It's not affection reaching for you in the night. It's surveillance, a probe, a test to see if your fortress still has cracks. That soft hey is not sweet. It's strategic. It's not about you, it's about control. And the moment you reply without thinking, you hand them the keys to your peace all over again. Think about it. They didn't text you during your darkest nights when you were drowning in silence. They appear now when your strength is slowly returning, when your discipline is beginning to heal you. That timing is not coincidence. It's calculation. They sense the shift. They feel the grip slipping. And now, they want proof. Brother, this is why most men fail. They react instantly. They call it kindness. They call it maturity. But beneath the surface, it's desperation. Proof that the leash still fits. Every fast reply is training. It teaches them you're still predictable, still available, still vulnerable. But what if you didn't play their game? What if your response or your refusal to respond flipped the entire dynamic? Imagine silence becoming a storm, every withheld word cutting deeper than 1,000 confessions. Imagine them pacing, checking their phone, realizing for the first time that their old tricks no longer work on you. That's when the hunter becomes the hunted. This isn't revenge. This is stoicism in action. It's sovereignty over your own mind. And in this video, I'm going to hand you the exact response that not only protects your dignity, but destroys their illusion of power. So before we dive in, hit that like button so more men can reclaim their strength. Subscribe to Stoic Station, because every day here we sharpen the discipline, the peace, and the power you need to stay untouchable. And in the comments, drop a simple one if you've ever fallen for that late-night text, or a 2 if you're ready to master silence once and for all. Now, let's expose the first trap, because the most dangerous message is always the one that looks the most innocent. 1. The trap behind the innocent message. Brother, the most dangerous text doesn't look dangerous at all. It's soft, casual, almost sweet. A simple hey or thinking of you. On the surface it feels harmless, maybe even flattering, but don't be fooled. That soft hey isn't affection, it's reconnaissance. It's not love reaching out to you, it's a probe designed to see if you're still vulnerable, if they can still shake your world with a single buzz. You might think they miss you, but what they really miss is the power of knowing they can enter your mind and disrupt your peace whenever they choose. And have you noticed the timing? These messages never come when you're at your weakest. They don't arrive in the middle of your heartbreak, when you're already checking your phone every 5 minutes. No, they appear when you've started to rebuild yourself, when you've pulled back into silence, when the discipline of no contact is finally beginning to work in your favor. It's when your strength is returning, when your dignity is knitting itself back together. That's when the screen lights up with their so-called innocent words. That's not coincidence, my friend. That's strategy. They sense the shift. They feel their grip loosening. And that subtle panic drives them to test if they still have access. This is why I tell you, that message is not love knocking, it's control knocking. If you open the door too fast, you hand back the keys to the very person you've been fighting to free yourself from. And the cruel irony is that the test is always wrapped in sugar. They don't come back with clarity or with accountability or with a plan to rebuild what was broken. No, they come back with crumbs, short words, vague affection, just enough to trigger your old instincts. They want to know if the old version of you still exists. The version that would drop everything, lose sleep, and cling to any hint of attention. The trap works because your heart wants to believe. You see "hey," and a rush of questions flood your mind. Do they miss me? Did they finally realize my worth? Are they trying to reconnect? That hope is what feeds the trap, because in that moment you forget your progress and you forget your boundaries. You forget that silence was not a punishment, but a weapon to reclaim your dignity. So here's the truth. The first step to breaking free is awareness. You must learn to see that message for what it really is. It's not a bridge being built, it's bait being dangled. The words don't carry love, they carry a hook. And when you recognize this, when you can call it out in your own mind, something powerful begins to shift. Suddenly, you're no longer the prey reacting to their moves. You're the man observing the game, calm and unshaken. And brother, when you reach that clarity, you hold the real advantage. Because now every buzz, every breadcrumb, every attempt at emotional access becomes nothing more than noise against the fortress of your peace. And this is where the story starts to get interesting, because the real battle isn't the message they send, it's the reaction you choose. 2. Why most men fail instantly. Brother, let me give you a harsh truth. 90% of men fail this test in the first 5 minutes. The moment that notification lights up the screen, a surge of electricity runs through the body, part anxiety, part nostalgia, part hope. You feel it in your chest, in your fingertips, in the sudden urgency to grab your phone. It's as if all the progress you made, days, weeks, even months of silence, evaporates in an instant. That's the power of the trap. It doesn't even need effort from them. Just 2 words and your self-control begins to shake. You convince yourself that replying quickly is harmless. You tell yourself it shows maturity, that you're above games, that you're taking the so-called high road. You may even justify it by saying you're being polite, kind, or respectful. But here's the brutal reality. Your instant reply doesn't communicate maturity. It doesn't say, "I'm kind." It screams something much darker. It says, "I'm still yours to control. Even after all this time, I still jump when you call." And brother, nothing destroys your frame faster than that. Think about it. The silence you've worked so hard to maintain was never about punishing them. It was about reclaiming yourself. It was about proving to yourself that your dignity is not negotiable. But the second you reply without thought, all of that effort crumbles like sand in the tide. In their eyes, you become predictable again. Your silence loses its weight, and you become their puppet, pulled back into the same strings you've been fighting to cut. Months of rebuilding can collapse in seconds because you couldn't master the pause. The truth is, most men fail here because of fear. Fear of losing the connection forever, fear of seeming rude, fear that silence might make them appear weak or bitter. But here's the twist. Silence is not weakness, it's strength under pressure. Every man who breaks silence too soon does it because he underestimates the value of restraint. He thinks urgency communicates importance, when in fact urgency exposes desperation. This is where you need to see the game for what it is. Their text is not a call to reconciliation. It's a call to measure your response. And your defense, your weapon, your ultimate test is the pause. You don't have to reply in 5 minutes. You don't even have to reply in 5 hours. The pause buys you clarity. The pause robs them of certainty. The pause reminds you that you are not at their mercy anymore. Brother, every second you hold back is a second you grow stronger. Every hour you let pass without a reply is another crack in the illusion of their control. When you delay, you aren't avoiding. You're proving to yourself that your life is no longer dictated by their breadcrumb of attention. That's how real strength is forged. In the discipline of silence, in the mastery of your own reactions. So the next time that buzz tempts you, remember this. Your first 5 minutes decide everything. 90% of men fail because they rush. Be the 10% who doesn't. Be the man who masters the pause. Because in that pause lies your dignity, your peace, and the unraveling of their power. And if you think silence is uncomfortable, wait until you see how uncomfortable it makes them. That's where the tables begin to turn. 3. The brutal psychological consequences. Brother, here's the part most men don't want to face. Quick replies don't heal, they train. Every time you answer immediately, you're not showing kindness, you're teaching them. You're teaching them that your boundaries can be bent, that your silence was never strength, only a temporary performance. You think you're opening a door to reconciliation, but what you're really opening is a classroom where they learn exactly how to keep control over you. The harsh truth is this: they're never surprised when you reply fast. That's the entire reason they reached out in the first place. They sent that little breadcrumb because deep down they expected you to grab it. And when you do, their theory is confirmed. Your silence, your dignity, the discipline you fought so hard to maintain, it all collapses into the image of a man who was only waiting for permission. That's the brutal psychological consequence. The silence you thought was rebuilding your power now looks fake, like a tantrum a child throws, until mom finally says, "Okay, you can speak again." And this realization cuts deeper than any rejection. It makes you feel weaker than before you even started no contact. Because now, you haven't just lost control, you've proven to yourself that maybe you never had it. You've shown them that all your progress was an act, and acts can be broken with a single word. My friend, nothing is more painful than seeing your hard-earned strength dissolve in seconds, not because of what they did, but because of how you reacted. That's why the damage isn't only about how they see you, it's about how you see yourself. Self-respect is fragile when you're healing. Every time you betray your own boundary, you chip away at the man you're trying to become. You may have gone weeks ignoring their silence, working on your health, building your discipline, only to undo it all with one desperate paragraph. And the worst part is, the moment you hit send, you feel it. That hollow sinking in your chest, that voice whispering, "I just gave them back the power." But you need to understand what's really happening here. Every instant reply doesn't feed love, it feeds ego. It doesn't mend connection, it inflates their confidence that you're still under their thumb. While you're lying awake analyzing every word of their text, they're lying in bed smirking, knowing they still hold a string tied to your heart. That's the psychological trap. You think you're regaining closeness, but in reality, you're reinforcing their dominance. So here's the solution. Recognize it for what it is. The next time your fingers itch to type a response, remember that you're not feeding healing, you're fueling control. Your quick replies don't bridge the distance, they erase the progress. But your restraint, your ability to pause, breathe, and hold your silence, that's what builds the man you've been working to become. The man who learns restraint never has to wonder who controls the frame, because the answer becomes clear. He does. And here's the beauty of it, brother. Every second you don't reply, you're not only dismantling their illusion of control, you're reinforcing your own. You're teaching yourself that you can sit with discomfort, that you don't need their validation, that your peace matters more than their approval. That lesson is priceless. It's what separates men who stay trapped in the cycle from men who finally break free. So ask yourself this: will you keep training them to see your boundaries as negotiable, or will you train yourself to master restraint? Because the man who can wait, who can endure the itch of the phone buzzing without giving in, becomes unshakable. And when you become unshakable, you don't just win the battle, you end the war. And brother, when you can do that, The next message they send won't matter. What will matter is that for the first time, they'll realize they don't control you anymore. And that's when the tables start to turn. 4. What they really want. Brother, let's strip away the illusion. They don't want you, they want supply. That text you received after weeks or months of silence wasn't born out of love or longing. It was born out of hunger. And not the kind of hunger for connection, but the hunger of a starving ego. These messages never arrive when they're satisfied, secure, or fulfilled. They show up the moment their well runs dry, when life isn't giving them the emotional hit they're addicted to, and they remember where they once got it with ease. You. Think about the timing. It's never when they're happy with someone new, when their nights are full and their heart is content. No, the text always lands when something is missing. Maybe their new fling isn't giving them the thrill they expected. Maybe they're sitting in bed at 2 in the morning, restless and lonely, scrolling through old conversations. Maybe a post you made reminded them of the validation they used to pull from you like oxygen. And guess what? In that moment, you don't show up in their mind as a person. They see you as a station, a reliable stop where they know they can fuel up their ego. That's the brutal truth. They're not thinking, I miss his soul, I miss who he is as a man. They're thinking, I wonder if I can still get that same rush of power from him. I wonder if he'll still respond the second I dangle a crumb. You become a test, an experiment, a quick fix. And every time you answer quickly, every time you pour out paragraphs or updates about your life, you confirm their suspicion. You're still hooked. You're still available. You're still that fuel station they can count on when all else fails. And here's where the damage gets deeper. The moment you give them that supply, it doesn't bring you closer. It pushes you further away. Why? Because nothing kills attraction and respect faster than predictability. When you give them exactly what they expect, you become boring. You're no longer a challenge. You're no longer the man who can walk away. You're just the same old source they can return to whenever they're empty. And brother, being somebody's fallback option is the lowest position a man can put himself in. But here's the solution, and it's simpler than most men realize. You must refuse to be their fallback. You must cut off the supply. Not with anger, not with drama, not with long speeches about how you deserve better. With silence, with calm, with the unshakable discipline of a man who knows his worth. Because when the source dries up, when their attempt at fishing comes back empty, something remarkable happens. They have to hunt somewhere else. Their ego, starving for validation, won't be able to feed on you anymore. And the moment they realize the old tricks don't work, their entire illusion of control begins to shatter. This is where your power is revealed. The same text that once pulled you back into their orbit now becomes a reminder of how far you've come. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of feeding their ego, you starve it. And when you starve their ego, you feed your dignity. Every unanswered message, every delayed response, every refusal to supply validation is a brick laid in the foundation of your new strength. So the next time that late night thinking of you appears on your screen, pause. Ask yourself, are they reaching for my heart, or are they reaching for my fuel? The answer is almost always the same, and when you recognize it, when you refuse to be used as their fallback, you free yourself from the cycle. You stop being the man they can manipulate for supply and become the man they can no longer touch. That's the shift, brother. That's when the hunter, desperate for control, finds themselves empty-handed, and you, calm and steady, walk forward with your power intact. 5. The Stoic Turn. My friend, when the message lights up your screen and your chest tightens with that familiar rush, you need a shield, and that shield is stoicism. Without it, you fall into the same trap most men do. They look at silence as weakness. They convince themselves that by staying quiet, they're being cold or bitter, so they break it. They send a reply just to prove they're mature or to show care. But here's the truth. Breaking your silence to prove yourself doesn't show strength. It shows you're still controlled by the urge to explain, to justify, to prove your value. And that's not care. It's desperation dressed as kindness. Silence, properly understood, is not emptiness, it's sovereignty. It's the act of declaring that your peace is not for sale, that your time is not available to anyone who decides to throw crumbs your way. It is not passive, it is active mastery. Silence says, I choose when, if, and how I will respond. And brother, that choice is everything, because every emotional reaction they expect from you, every paragraph, every late-night confession, every quick reassurance, is the real trap. The moment you give it, you're back inside the cage. They want your fire. They want your spark. They want to feel that they can still light you up with a single word. But the Stoic man refuses. He doesn't hand over the match. He lets them sit in their own darkness, while he continues walking in the light of his discipline. That is the power they never see coming. They expect chaos. They expect begging. They expect the same old pattern of you crumbling. But you give them none of it. You give them indifference, cold, calm, unshakable. And here's the paradox. Indifference is not hatred. It's not bitterness. Hatred still says, you matter enough to stir my anger. Indifference says, you are no longer a factor in my state of mind. When you reply, if you reply at all, it's only with distance. A simple, okay. Thanks for reaching out. Short, dry, devoid of the warmth they're hunting for. Or better yet, you don't reply at all, because your silence is a reply louder than any words. It says, I've moved on. My peace is mine. Your validation no longer dictates my choices. The Stoic man chooses his words the way a warrior chooses his weapons, rarely, carefully, and with precision. He doesn't swing wildly just to prove he's armed. He knows the value of restraint. He knows that not every battle deserves engagement. In fact, most do not. And that's where your strength grows. Every time you resist the urge to explain yourself, every time you choose stillness over reaction, you build a muscle that most men never develop, the muscle of emotional sovereignty. This is where transformation happens. The text that once would have sent you spiraling into doubt now becomes fuel for your clarity. You see it not as affection, but as a test, not as a bridge, but as bait. And instead of chasing, you stand still, you observe, you decide, you remain the man in control. That shift, brother, is the Stoic turn. It's the moment you stop being a slave to their approval and start being the master of your own response. And here's the viral truth that will stick with you. The more emotionless you become in the face of manipulation, the more powerful you appear. The less you react, the more they panic. The quieter you are, the louder their insecurity grows. Because nothing terrifies someone who lives off control more than realizing their old buttons no longer work. That's when you know you've won, not because you shouted louder, but because you didn't need to shout at all. 6. Strategic silence as a weapon. Brother, once you understand the Stoic turn, you begin to see silence not as an absence, but as a weapon. And not just any weapon. It's the sharpest blade in your arsenal because it cuts where words can't reach. Most men underestimate it. They think silence is passive, that it means doing nothing. But strategic silence is deliberate. It's calculated. It's the refusal to play their game while making them question everything they thought they knew about you. When they send that message, they expect noise. They expect the familiar explosion of emotion, the long texts, the late-night calls, the desperate explanations. What they don't expect is the void. That's where the power lies. Because when their baited hook drops into silence, the only thing they're left to wrestle with is their own mind. And trust me, that is the one battlefield they cannot control. This is how cognitive dissonance takes root. They remembered you as the man who always jumped at their words, who cracked the second they dangled a crumb of affection. Now they send a text and get nothing back. Their mind scrambles to fill in the gap. Did he change? Has he moved on? Am I no longer important? That uncertainty is torture. Every hour that passes without your response is like pouring acid on their ego. While you're living your life, hitting the gym, building your work, investing in yourself, they're refreshing their phone, scrolling your socials, and asking mutual friends about you. Silence has turned the tables. They're the ones waiting now. And here's the beauty of it. You don't need to announce your silence. You don't need to post quotes or drop hints online. That's noise disguised as silence, and it gives them exactly what they want. Proof that you're still tuned in. True silence is invisible. It's you carrying on as if they never sent anything. It's you refusing to break your rhythm for a distraction. That absence of reaction is louder than any speech, more crushing than any angry rant. But let's be clear, silence isn't easy. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to endure the itch of wanting to check if they wrote back, to resist the urge to break the quiet with a quick, just being polite. Yet, it's in that tension that your strength is forged. Every day you hold your silence is another day their power over you fades. Every unanswered buzz is a reminder that you are no longer available on demand. And over time, your silence becomes more than a tactic. It becomes your new identity. That's why I call it a weapon, because it doesn't just defend your peace, it actively erodes their control. It forces them into chaos while you remain steady. It starves their ego while you feed your dignity. And the longer you wield it, the more unstoppable you become. Brother, remember this. Silence is not weakness, it is warfare. Every hour you refuse to give them the reaction they crave is an hour you reclaim your sovereignty. And as their certainty crumbles, your calm rises. The hunter becomes the hunted. And that's when silence, the very thing they once dismissed, becomes the storm that breaks them. 7. Role reversal. The hunter becomes the hunted. Brother, here's where the silence turns from a shield into a trap of its own, the moment when the hunter becomes the hunted. For weeks, maybe months, they lived with the certainty that they owned a piece of your mind. They believed they could pull you back whenever they wanted with a breadcrumb of attention, a late-night hey, or a casual thinking of you. They hunted your attention because they thought you were easy prey. But when you stop playing their game, when your silence stays unbroken, everything shifts. At first, they're confident. They send the message and wait for the reaction they've gotten 100 times before. But then the hours pass, then the day, and the silence grows heavier. That's when doubt creeps in. They check their phone more often. They stare at your name in their message thread and wonder why you haven't moved. They scroll your social media looking for signs. They ask mutual friends subtle questions, testing if you're still thinking about them. The irony is delicious. While you're living free, they're the ones chained to uncertainty. This is the role reversal that makes silence devastating. You were once the man refreshing the screen, wondering when they'd respond. Now they're the one haunted by the unanswered message, replaying old memories, searching for cracks in your composure. Your silence is no longer just silence. It's a mirror reflecting their own insecurity back at them. And brother, insecurity eats a person alive faster than any words you could ever say. Think about how powerful this shift is. You no longer need to chase. You don't need to explain, argue, or prove your worth. By doing nothing, you've flipped the entire dynamic. They expected to see the old version of you, the man who would crumble the moment they dangled attention. Instead, they're confronted with someone new, someone calm, focused, unreachable. That unfamiliarity rattles them. It's like trying to play a game with a board that's missing half the pieces. They don't know the rules anymore, and that confusion drives them deeper into desperation. And here's the best part. The more desperate they get, the more obvious it becomes. They may send a second message, then a third, each one a little more probing than the last. They may switch tactics, first friendly, then flirty, then emotional, then angry, just to spark any kind of reaction. They're throwing darts in the dark, hoping one will land. But with every failed attempt, the reality sets in. The control they once had is gone. That's the moment you realize you don't need to chase power. It comes to you when you refuse to give it away. The silence you once feared now becomes your throne. And while they're pacing in circles, analyzing and second-guessing, you're building, growing, and living without them. The hunter, who once thrived on your attention, now finds themselves starving. And you, the man they thought was prey, have become untouchable. Brother, never forget this reversal. It's not about revenge, it's about clarity. It's about understanding that the tables turn not through anger, not through long speeches, but through your calm refusal to play. The man who can sit in silence, who can withhold reaction, is the man who rewrites the story. And when you reach this point, you'll see it clearly. The person who thought they owned your mind is now consumed by thoughts of you. That is the true power of silence. That is when the hunted becomes the hunter. 8. The brutal reply that destroys them. Brother, silence will always be your sharpest weapon, but there are moments when a reply becomes unavoidable. Maybe it's for clarity. Maybe it's because circumstances force your hand. And this is where most men lose the ground they've gained. They over-explain. They pour out their emotions. They write essays trying to prove they've grown. But here's the hard truth. The longer your response, the weaker you look. The more emotional your words, the more control you hand back to them. That's why the brutal reply isn't loud or angry. It's cold, short, and precise. Understand this. They're not reaching out to reconnect. They're reaching out to measure. They want to know if the old version of you still exists, the man who jumped at every breadcrumb. They're hoping to see your heart spill across the screen, to feel that rush of power knowing they can still make you move. That's why the brutal reply works, because it denies them everything they came for. It's not warmth, not reassurance, not an invitation. It's distance wrapped in words. Think of it this way. The brutal reply is not about cruelty. It's about clarity. It communicates that you've moved forward, that their bait no longer works, that you no longer need what they're offering. Every short, detached response is a statement of sovereignty, and the contrast between what they expected and what they receive creates a shockwave they cannot ignore. Here are some examples of brutal replies, each crafted for different scenarios men face. When they send a casual, "Hey," after months, "Okay." When they write, "Hope you're well, thanks." When they drop a late night "thinking of you" at 2 a.m., "Don't text me at this hour." When they try flirting to test the waters, "Not interested in going backward." When they throw out a fake apology, "Appreciate the message, I've moved on." When they say "Just wanted to check in, busy, take care." When they create drama with a fake emergency, "If it's serious, call the right support." Notice the pattern. Each response is short. Each response is stripped of emotion. Each response closes the door instead of opening it wider. You're not rude. You're not cruel. You're clear. And clarity is devastating to someone who thrives on confusion and control. The key is this. Your reply should feel like it came from a man who has already built a new life. not from a man still stuck in the old one. It should read like something you'd send to a distant coworker or a polite stranger, not someone who once had access to your heart. That emotional distance is what delivers the real blow, because nothing hurts them more than realizing the power they once wielded now lands flat, powerless, meaningless. And sometimes, brother, the most brutal reply is no reply at all. Silence after their attempt is the loudest message you can send. It communicates that they no longer have the privilege of even a single word from you. That absence is what drives them into panic, because there is no foothold, no thread to pull on, no spark to reignite. So whether you choose silence or a cold, clipped response, remember this. The brutal reply is not about revenge, it's about reclaiming your frame. It tells them without question, I am no longer yours to control. And when you master this, you'll see the shift in their eyes, in their tone, in their desperation. They will realize that the game is over, not because you played harder, but because you stopped playing altogether. Brother, that's the reply that destroys them. Not anger, not pleading, not essays, but indifference sharpened into a blade. And once you wield it, you'll never look at those late-night texts the same way again. 9. The final victory. Your peace over their control. Brother, the war was never about who texted first, who ignored longer, or who won the last exchange of words. The war was always about control, who owned your peace of mind. And the final victory isn't found in clever comebacks or even in the silence itself. The final victory is when you realize that their messages, their games, their attempts at manipulation no longer have the power to touch your inner world. That's when you're free. Think about how far you've come. At the beginning, their silence rattled you. Every buzz of your phone felt like life or death. You waited, you wondered, you obsessed over their attention. But now you've seen behind the curtain. You understand that those late-night messages were never about love. They were about ego. They didn't miss you. They missed the supply you gave them. They weren't reaching for your heart. They were reaching for control. And by refusing to hand it over, by cutting off the supply, by replying only with cold precision or not at all, you flipped the script. You starved their ego and fed your own dignity. The beauty of this final stage is that your peace becomes untouchable. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to explain your silence, defend your choices, or justify your boundaries. You simply live, and in that living, you win. Every day you stay grounded. Every day you invest in your own growth. Every day you choose calm over chaos. You widen the gap between who you were and who you've become. And that gap is what destroys their illusion of control. Because here's the truth. They can't compete with a man who no longer competes. They can't shake a man who no longer reacts. They can't control a man who no longer craves their validation. When they see that your life is moving forward, that you're building, thriving, smiling without them, that's when the panic sets in. That's when they realize the access they took for granted is gone forever. And that, brother, is the real victory. Not revenge, not anger, but freedom. And let me tell you something even more powerful. When you reach this level of peace, you don't just repel the toxic, you attract the genuine. Healthy people respect boundaries. Real partners admire discipline. The man who can hold his frame, who can master silence, who can value his peace above games, that man becomes magnetic. Not because he's trying to impress anyone, but because he lives in alignment with his own worth. So here's your challenge. The next time the phone lights up, the next time the bait is thrown, the next time you feel that urge to reply, remember what's at stake. It's not the conversation, it's not the text, it's your peace. And peace, once reclaimed, is too valuable to trade for crumbs. Choose it every time. Protect it like a warrior protects his shield, because when you guard your peace, no one can own you again. Brother, if this message hit you deep, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like so more men can rise into their strength. Subscribe to Stoic Station for daily reminders of discipline, peace, and power. And in the comments, anchor this truth. I value my peace more than their games. Because the day you live by that is the day you win the only battle that ever mattered.